Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. In the quiet garden of the soul, the teaching of Jesus resonates like a gentle yet profound melody. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. This teaching is not just a promise, but also an invitation, a guiding compass for each of us on our human journey. The peace Jesus speaks of is not merely the absence of war, of swords and blades. It is a deep serenity within each person's soul, harmony within the family, empathy within the community, and understanding among nations. A peacemaker is one who dares to step out of their selfish ego, using love to mend fractures, tolerance to erase hatred, and their own humility to bridge differences. They are the fathers and mothers who patiently teach their children about forgiveness. They are the friends who are ready to listen and share. They are the kind neighbors who always smile and help one another. They do not need to do great, monumental things. They simply sow seeds of peace in their small daily actions. And how noble their reward is, to be called children of God. That name is not just a title, but a recognition of a close relationship, a wonderful harmony with God Himself, the source of all peace. To be a child of God means to be enveloped in His boundless love, to share in His nature of love and creation. The journey of building peace can be arduous, demanding perseverance and a courageous heart. But let us always remember that every step we take on that path is a step closer to our Father in heaven. As a theologian once contemplated, peace is not the destination at the end of the road, but the very road we are walking. May each of us, through our own lives, become diligent builders, contributing bricks of love to build a peaceful world, worthy of the noble title that the Lord has promised. Continuing this stream of emotion about diligent builders, let us contemplate more deeply the precious gem that Jesus has bestowed upon us. The teaching, "Blessed are the peacemakers," is not just a path, but a vibrant sky of living philosophy. If we look closely, we will see that each facet of this gem reflects a different light, a profound truth about how we exist and relate to one another in this world. These are not distant dogmas, but intimate whispers, woven from His very dialogues on the dusty roads of Galilee long ago. Below are the philosophies drawn from that eternal teaching. 1. Philosophy of origin. True peace begins with the stillness of the soul. You cannot give to others what you do not have yourself. A soul full of storms, anxiety, and judgment cannot sow peace. Therefore, the journey to build peace for the world must begin with creating tranquility and harmony within one's own heart. One afternoon, after a day of teaching, Jesus and His apostles took a boat to rest on the Sea of Galilee. Simon Peter was annoyed by a failed catch. He constantly complained about the water and the fish. Jesus looked at him, then at the rippling surface of the lake, and said, "Simon, I see your heart is as turbulent as this lake. You wish for a full net, yet you let disappointment take over. How can you preach about the peace of the kingdom of heaven when you cannot find it in an empty net?" Peter fell silent, bowing his head. Jesus placed a hand on his shoulder. "Let the peace of the Father dwell in you first. When your heart is as still as a ripple-free lake, you will see all things clearly, and the peace you give will truly be peace from God." 2. Philosophy of action. Peacemaking is a verb, not a noun. Peace is not a static state, a mere absence of conflict. It requires active effort, the courage to step in, to mend, to build bridges where there were once chasms. In a market in Capernaum, Two neighbors were loudly arguing over a land boundary. The Apostle Andrew saw this and said to Jesus, "Teacher, we should stay away from this noisy place." Jesus shook his head. "Peace is not about avoiding conflict, Andrew. Peace is about stepping into the midst of conflict and building a bridge of understanding." With that, he approached the two men. He did not judge who was right or wrong. He simply listened to each person's story, then gently asked them, "Is your neighborly love more valuable, or is this piece of land?" His calm presence and words cooled their anger. They began to talk to each other more gently. Andrew watched and understood that building peace was real work. 3. Philosophy of foundation. The foundation of peace is forgiveness. Resentment is the bricks that build walls of separation. Forgiveness is the cement that binds the bricks of love. Without forgiveness, all efforts at reconciliation are merely temporary and will collapse when tested. A Samaritan woman came to Jesus at Jacob's well, weeping as she told of the generational feud between her family and another in the village. She said, "I can never be at peace when their image haunts me." Jesus drew a bucket of water and asked, "If you hold this hot coal in your hand, who gets burned?" "It is I, teacher," the woman replied. "Resentment is the same," he said. "You hold it in your heart, and you are the one who suffers. Forgiveness is not saying their actions were right. Forgiveness is choosing to free yourself from that burning coal. That is when peace begins to return to you. 4. Philosophy of the tool. Listening is the most powerful tool of a peacemaker. Most conflicts arise from misunderstanding. A peacemaker does not rush to speak, but first opens their heart to listen, to empathize with the story and the pain of others. James and John returned to Jesus, their faces dark with anger. "Teacher," John said, "that village did not welcome us. Let us call fire down from heaven to destroy them." Jesus looked at them, not with anger, but with a simple question. "Have you asked why they did that?" The two apostles were stunned. They had only seen the act of rejection without understanding the reason. Jesus gently explained, "Before you condemn, seek to understand. A heart quick to judge will never build peace. Use your ears more than your tongue. That is the first step to healing the world." 5. Philosophy of balance. True peace always walks hand in hand with justice. A peace built on injustice, oppression, and the silence of the weak is only a temporary truce. Lasting peace requires that truth be respected and justice be done. When Jesus went to the house of Zacchaeus, a tax collector hated by the people, many whispered. They thought he was associating with a sinner. After the meal, moved by the Holy Spirit, Zacchaeus stood up and said, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Jesus smiled and said to the crowd, "Today salvation has come to this house. Do you see? Peace did not come only when Zacchaeus opened his home, but it truly came when he opened his heart to practice justice. Peace and justice kiss each other. That is a sign of the kingdom of heaven." 6. Philosophy of cost. Building peace requires sacrifice, especially the sacrifice of the ego. To reconcile, someone must be willing to give up the right to be right, the right to win, the right to retaliate. The price of peace is often humility and altruism, the sacrifice of one's proud ego. 2 farmer brothers argued over a stream that flowed through their lands. Both believed they were in the right. They came to Jesus for judgment. After listening to them, he did not say who was right or wrong. He only asked the older brother, "Are you willing to let your brother use the water first on dry days?" Then he asked the younger brother, "Are you willing to help your brother clear the stream if it gets blocked?" Both were silent. Jesus continued, "Peace does not lie in who has rights over the stream. It lies in who is willing to sacrifice a little of their own interests for the other. When both of you are willing to give, the stream will become a blessing for both, instead of a source of dispute." 7. Philosophy of strength. The strength of a peacemaker lies in gentleness, not violence. Violence only creates submission and hatred, sowing the seeds for a larger conflict in the future. Gentleness, steadfast in love, has the power to persuade and transform hearts in a lasting way. A haughty Roman soldier pushed over a Jewish vendor, spilling his basket of vegetables. The Apostle Peter clenched his fists, about to intervene. But Jesus stopped him. He walked over and silently helped the vendor pick up every vegetable. The Roman soldier was surprised by this action. He expected resistance, a curse, but only received silence and a calm act of help. A look of confusion and shame crossed his face. He quietly walked away. Jesus said to Peter, "The power of the sword creates fear. The power of gentleness creates respect and can awaken the conscience. My Father's way does not use violence to fight violence." 8. Philosophy of scale. The kingdom of peace is built with the small bricks of daily kindness. Do not wait for grand opportunities to create peace. Start with the smallest actions: a smile, a word of inquiry, an act of help without calculation. These actions spread like ripples, creating an ocean of tranquility. The apostles were arguing among themselves about who was the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Jesus called a child over, had him stand among them, and said, "You argue about great things, but you forget the essential." He pointed to the child who was sharing his piece of bread with another child. The kingdom of heaven belongs to those who are like this child. He does not build peace with eloquent speeches, but by sharing his piece of bread. Learn from that. A small act of love is worth more than all debates about power. 9. Philosophy of identity. When we build peace, we are reflecting the image of God Himself. Being called children of God is not a future reward, but a recognition of our identity in the present. God is the source of peace. When we act for peace, we are participating in His very work, and thus we reveal ourselves to be His children. The Apostle Thomas asked Jesus, "Teacher, why are peacemakers called children of God?" Jesus replied, "Thomas, you look at a carpenter, and people know him by the products he makes. You look at a farmer, and people know him by the crops he grows. So how will people recognize the children of my Father, who is in heaven?" He paused, then continued, "My Father is the source of all harmony and peace. When you mend what is broken, when you bring love to where there is hatred, you are doing the work of the Father Himself. Your actions show that you carry His genes. Therefore, the world will look and recognize this person is truly a child of God. 10. Philosophy of legacy. Peace is the most precious legacy we leave for future generations. Money and fame will vanish like smoke. But a community built on the foundation of harmony and love is a living legacy, a priceless gift that can endure for generations. Near the end of his earthly life, a zealous young man asked Jesus, "Teacher, must we build a great and magnificent temple to remember your name?" Jesus looked at the houses in the village, at the children playing, and answered, "The most beautiful temple you can build for me is not of stone or gold. That temple is built of reconciled hearts. Leave for your descendants a village without quarrels, a community that knows how to love one another. That is the most eternal monument, the most precious legacy you can offer to God and leave for humanity. 11. Philosophy of paradox. Peace is not the absence of the storm, but the calm in the eye of the storm. Many people mistakenly believe that having peace means having a smooth life, without any tempests. But Jesus' philosophy teaches that true peace is an inner strength, a deep trust in God that helps us stand firm and maintain serenity even when life is stormy. The apostles were in a boat with Jesus when a great storm arose, and the waves crashed into the boat, nearly sinking it. They panicked, terrified, and quickly woke him as he slept in the stern. "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" Jesus woke up, rebuked the wind and the waves, and they became calm. Then he turned to the apostles, not to scold the storm, but to ask them, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" The lesson was not in his calming the external storm, but in his pointing out the greater storm within the apostles' hearts, fear and lack of trust. His peace did not depend on the weather. It existed even in the most perilous moments. 12. Philosophy of language. Words can be swords that divide or olive oil that soothes wounds. A peacemaker is deeply aware of the power of words. They do not use words to condemn, judge, or humiliate others. Instead, they use the language of compassion, encouragement, and open-ended questions that lead to understanding. A group of Pharisees brought before Jesus a woman caught in the act of adultery. They used words as sharp as knives, both to condemn the woman and to trap him. "Teacher, according to the law of Moses, such women must be stoned. What do you say?" They expected a controversial answer, but Jesus remained silent, bending down to write on the ground. When they kept questioning him, he stood up and said just one sentence. "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." His words were not aimed at the woman, but at the consciences of her accusers. It did not provoke confrontation, but invited self-reflection. One by one, from the oldest to the youngest, they quietly left. He had used words to save a life and teach a lesson to all. 13. Philosophy of presence. Sometimes the greatest act of reconciliation is simply being present with someone who is suffering. In the face of great pain, all advice and solutions can become hollow. A peacemaker understands that a silent presence, a hand to hold, a shoulder to lean on, can convey empathy and peace more powerfully than 1,000 words. When Lazarus, his friend, died, Jesus went to the village of Bethany. Seeing Mary and Martha weeping for their brother, he did not immediately preach about the resurrection or the power of God. The Bible records a deeply moving detail. Jesus wept. He wept with them. His presence and tears showed that he completely empathized with human suffering. It was in that silent sharing that he brought the deepest comfort, even before he performed the miracle of raising Lazarus. 14. Philosophy of courage. Peace does not mean weakness or indifference to evil. True peace is not complicit silence in the face of injustice. Sometimes, to protect true peace, one must act courageously to oppose what is destroying harmony and offending the sacred. When Jesus entered the temple in Jerusalem and saw people turning a house of prayer into a marketplace for buying, selling, and exchanging money, he became angry. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves. This act might not seem peaceful, but in reality, it was an act of peacemaking on a deeper level. He was restoring sacred peace and order to his Father's house. He showed that true peace is not permissiveness, but a fierce commitment to truth and justice. 15. Philosophy of ripple effect. An act of reconciliation has the power to spread like ripples. Never underestimate a small gesture of love or an act of forgiveness. It can be the beginning of a chain of positive changes, breaking the cycle of hatred and spreading tranquility throughout a community. In the story of the woman caught in adultery, after Jesus said, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone," the oldest one left first. His action created an effect. The others saw it and also examined their own consciences. The unspoken forgiveness of Jesus spread from one person to another, and the crowd, once seething with murderous intent, quietly dispersed. A single act saved a life and turned an angry mob into a group of self-reflecting individuals. 16. Philosophy of humility. A peacemaker does not seek to be a hero, but to serve. The ego is always the greatest obstacle to peace. It wants to be recognized, to prove itself right, to be the winner. A true peacemaker sets their ego aside, willing to do things considered small or lowly to serve the common harmony. At the Last Supper, while the apostles were still arguing about who was the greatest, Jesus silently stood up, took off his outer garment, wrapped a towel around his waist, poured water into a basin, and began to wash each of their feet. Peter vehemently objected, unable to accept his teacher doing the work of a slave. But Jesus replied, "Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet." The act of washing feet is the ultimate lesson in humility. He taught that the path to peace and true greatness in the kingdom of heaven is the path downward, the path of service. 17. Philosophy of patience. Peace grows like a mustard seed. It needs time and cannot be rushed. The world wants immediate results, but peace is not like that. It is like planting a seed. A peacemaker must be a patient gardener, diligently cultivating, watering with love, and waiting for the sprout of reconciliation to grow in God's time. A villager asked Jesus, "Teacher, how can we stop the quarrels in our village? We have tried many ways to no avail." Jesus then told him the parable of the mustard seed. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his field. Though it is the smallest of all seeds, yet when it grows, it is the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds come and perch in its branches. Then he said to the man, "Do not be discouraged. Every kind word, every act of forgiveness you perform today is a mustard seed. It may seem small and insignificant now, but keep sowing patiently. One day, you will see a great tree of peace grow from those very seeds." 18. Philosophy of hospitality. Opening your home and table is opening your heart. Suspicion and distance are fertile ground for conflict. Hospitality, the act of inviting another person, especially someone scorned by society or considered an enemy, to share a meal, has an extraordinary power to break down those barriers and build friendship. The Pharisees and scribes always criticized Jesus for frequently eating with tax collectors and sinners. To them, it was an act of impurity. One day, while dining at a tax collector's house, someone asked his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" Jesus overheard and replied, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." His table became a space of healing and reconciliation. By sharing bread and wine, he declared that no one is excluded from the love of God. and that is the foundation for a comprehensive peace. 19. Philosophy of the enemy. The ultimate test of a peacemaker is to pray for and do good to those who persecute them. Anyone can be kind to their friends, but only those who are truly children of God can love their enemies. This is the most revolutionary philosophy, going against the natural human instinct of an eye for an eye. In the Sermon on the Mount, in the midst of a crowd of Jews living under Roman occupation, filled with resentment, Jesus delivered a shocking teaching. You have heard that it was said, "Love your neighbor and hate your enemy." But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. A patriot in the crowd might have asked, how can we love those who oppress us? Jesus might have answered, because your Father in heaven causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good. If you love only those who love you, what is so special about that? The act of loving your enemy is not to let them win, but to let the love of God win through you. That is how you break the cycle of hatred. 20. Philosophy of silence. Knowing when to speak and when to be silent is an art. Not every battle is worth fighting. Not every accusation is worth a response. Sometimes, a dignified silence is the most powerful answer, demonstrating an unshakable inner peace and confounding the aggressors. When Jesus was brought before Governor Pilate, he was accused of many things by the chief priests and elders. But before all the slander, he remained silent. Pilate was greatly astonished and asked, "Do you not hear all the things they are accusing you of?" But he gave him no answer, not even to a single charge. His silence was not weakness or fear. It was the silence of one who knew who he was and knew that truth did not need to be defended with futile arguments in an unjust court. His peace was so great that it enveloped and emptied the aggression of his accusers of its power. Before we continue with today's journey of discovery, we would greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to leave a comment and share your feelings. If you found this content valuable, please don't forget to hit the share button to spread these positive vibes to your friends and family. And now, let's get back to the program. 21. Philosophy of family. The family is the first training ground for practicing the virtue of peacemaking. If we cannot live in harmony with our dearest ones, the people we see every day, how can we bring peace to the world? Small conflicts within the family are opportunities for us to practice patience, forgiveness, listening, and unconditional love. The mother of the apostles James and John came to ask Jesus to let her 2 sons sit at his right and left in his kingdom. When the other 10 apostles heard this, they were indignant and jealous of the 2 brothers. An argument arose. Jesus called them all together and said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them. It shall not be so among you. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant." He used this very conflict to teach them a lesson in humility. He reminded them that they were a spiritual family, where greatness is measured by service, not power. Peace in the apostolic family could only be restored when they abandoned their personal ambitions. 22. Philosophy of vision. Peace is only possible when we see the image of God in others. Conflict often stems from how we label others. Roman, Samaritan, tax collector, sinner. A peacemaker has the ability to see through all labels and prejudices to recognize the sacred dignity and common humanity in every person. A Roman centurion, a member of the occupying forces, came to ask Jesus to heal his servant. Instead of being distant or suspicious, Jesus was ready to go to his house. The centurion humbly replied, "Lord, I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. But just say the word, and my servant will be healed." Jesus was amazed at his faith and said to the crowd, "Truly I tell you, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith." He did not see an occupier, but a person of immense faith. By honoring the faith of a foreigner, he broke down the wall of prejudice between Jews and Gentiles, teaching that peace begins when we see others through the eyes of God. 23. Philosophy of joy. The result of reconciliation is not just the absence of conflict, but a profound joy. Peace is not a neutral, dull state. When a broken relationship is mended, when forgiveness is given and received, a pure joy overflows. This joy is a sign that the kingdom of heaven is present. To explain the joy of God when a sinner repents, Jesus told the parable of the prodigal son. When the lost son returned, the father not only forgave him, but threw a great feast. He said to the angry older son, "We had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." The feast is a symbol of the joy of reconciliation. Peace in the family was not only restored, but it was also celebrated with music, dancing, and feasting. A peacemaker not only seeks to end quarrels, but also seeks to bring joy to relationships. 24. Philosophy of harmony. True peace includes living in harmony with all of nature. Humans are not separate from nature. Peace in the soul is closely linked to respect and love for God's creation. When we live in harmony with the earth, the sky, the plants, and the animals, we are also contributing to the universal peace of the cosmos. On one occasion of teaching, seeing the people were overly anxious about food and clothing, Jesus pointed to the fields and said, "See how the flowers of the field grow. They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon, in all his splendor, was dressed like one of these." He was not just teaching a lesson on trust. He was also inviting them to contemplate the perfect peace of nature. The flower does not worry. It simply lives and displays the beauty God has given it. Living in harmony with nature is a way to learn about peace without anxiety. 25. Philosophy of selflessness. A peacemaker does what is right, regardless of the outcome or recognition. Acting for peace is not an investment to reap a return of gratitude or praise. It is an act that flows from pure love. A peacemaker sows seeds, but is not overly concerned with who will reap or whether they will get to eat the fruit. On his way, Jesus healed 10 lepers. He told them to go and show themselves to the priests. As they went, they were cleansed, but only one of them, a Samaritan, came back, praising God in a loud voice and falling at his feet. Jesus asked, "Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner?" Although there was a hint of sadness, his act of healing was not affected by the ingratitude of the other 9. He gave peace and healing without any calculation. True peacemakers are the same. They act out of compassion, not for the hope of reward. 26. Philosophy of vulnerability. The courage to expose one's own wounds can be an act of peacemaking. People often build strong walls to hide their emotional wounds. But those walls also separate us from one another. The courage to show that we are also weak, also hurt, can invite empathy and break down the defenses of others, paving the way for healing. After his resurrection, Jesus appeared to the apostles, but Thomas was absent. He did not believe and said, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, I will not believe." 8 days later, Jesus appeared again and said to Thomas, Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. The resurrected Christ did not hide his wounds. On the contrary, he invited others to touch them. It was through those wounds that Thomas's faith was strengthened and peace was restored among the apostles. He taught that peace comes not from pretending to be perfect, but from the courage to share our scars. 27. Philosophy of choice. Peace is a decision, not a feeling. We cannot wait until we feel peaceful to act for peace. There will be times when our hearts are full of turmoil, anger, or fear. But even in those moments, we can choose to speak a kind word, choose not to retaliate, choose to act for the benefit of others. In the Garden of Gethsemane, facing the prospect of his passion, Jesus' soul was overwhelmed to the point of death. He prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me." His emotion at that moment was fear and anguish, not peace at all. But immediately after, he made a choice. "Yet not as I will, but as you will." That was the ultimate choice for peace. Perfect harmony with God's will, regardless of personal feelings. He chose the path of reconciliation for humanity, not because it was easy or felt good, but because it was the right path. 28. Philosophy of memory. Remembering moments of grace can fuel future peace efforts. When facing conflict, it is easy to remember only mistakes and hurts. A peacemaker is someone who can remind themselves and others of good memories, of times of forgiveness, of the love that once existed, to serve as a foundation for reconciliation. At the Last Supper, knowing in advance the betrayal, denial, and scattering of his disciples, Jesus did not focus on their impending failure. Instead, he instituted the Eucharist. He took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and said, "Do this in remembrance of me." This act of remembrance is an anchor of peace. He gave them an eternal memory of his sacrificial love, so that whenever they gathered and repeated this gesture, they would remember who they are, that they belong to each other and to him, and thereby find unity and peace again. 29. Philosophy of light. A person or community living in peace will automatically become a beacon for the world. Peace has its own attraction. It does not need advertisement or ostentation. A person with a peaceful soul, a harmonious family, a loving community, will radiate a kind of light that souls in turmoil and lost in darkness will naturally seek out. On a hill in Galilee, Jesus said to the crowd of poor and oppressed people, "You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." Those good deeds are precisely the acts of mercy, justice, and peace. A community that lives by the Beatitudes will become a town on a hill, a living testament that another way of life, a peaceful way of life, is entirely possible. 30. Philosophy of surrender. Ultimate peace is the act of letting go and trusting completely in the love of God. After all human efforts and endeavors, the deepest peace, the peace that the world cannot give, comes from recognizing that we are not in control of everything. It is the peace that comes from entrusting our lives, our anxieties, and even our successes and failures into the providential hands of a greater being. On the cross, amidst the almost physical and spiritual agony abandoned by the world, Jesus uttered his final words. They were not words of blame or despair, but an act of absolute surrender. "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." In that moment of complete letting go, he achieved perfect peace, a complete union with the Father. This is the final and highest philosophy. The peacemaker, after having done all they can, will find true rest and peace in trusting that the love of God will always have the final word. 31. Philosophy of simplicity. Peace is often found not by having more, but by letting go. The world encourages us to accumulate wealth, fame, and complex relationships, believing that this is the path to happiness. But true peace often comes from an unburdened soul, a simple life focused on what is essential and true. When Jesus visited the home of the sisters Martha and Mary, Martha was busy and worried about serving, while Mary simply sat at the Lord's feet, listening to his words. Martha, annoyed, said, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself?" Jesus gently replied, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but only one thing is needed. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." The better part was presence and listening, the simplicity of the soul. Peace did not come from a lavish feast, but from a heart not distracted by unnecessary worries. 32. Philosophy of disagreement. Living in peace does not mean we must agree on everything. Peace is not uniformity of thought, but mutual respect even in disagreement. We can hold firm to our positions while still engaging in open dialogue and giving others the space to be themselves. Nicodemus, a Pharisee leader, came to Jesus at night to avoid being seen. He and Jesus had very different theological views. Their dialogue was full of questions and difficult concepts, like being born again from above. Although Nicodemus did not fully understand, Jesus patiently explained to him. He did not demand that he immediately abandon all his old beliefs, but he opened a new door for him. That meeting was a sincere dialogue, an expression of peace in respect, not imposition. Peace is seeking truth together, not claiming to possess all of it. 33. Philosophy of blessing. Blessing others is an act of disarming one's own heart. When treated poorly, our instinct is to curse or wish ill upon the other person. But the act of blessing, actively wishing them well, has a strange power. It not only changes the external atmosphere, but more importantly, it extinguishes the fire of hatred within our own hearts. When the crowds gathered around Jesus, many loved him, but some also mocked and cursed him. The disciples felt angry. Jesus turned to them and taught, "Bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you. For if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? A blessing spoken will quench the fire of anger in your heart, and it can cool the hatred of others. Use gentleness to counter bitterness." 34. Philosophy of deep listening. Hearing the pain behind the angry words. People often do not say what they truly feel. Aggressive, demanding, or complaining words are often just a cover for a fear, a hurt, or a deep-seated need. A peacemaker has the ears of the heart, able to hear even what is not spoken. The Canaanite woman came begging Jesus to heal her daughter. At first he was silent, then used words that seemed harsh, but she persisted, responding with humble words. What did Jesus see? He not only heard her words, he heard the boundless love of a mother, an unshakable faith, and a desperate pain. He replied, "Woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted." He responded to the deep cry of her heart, not just her external words. Peace is created when we are capable of listening like that. 35. Philosophy of dynamic equilibrium. Peace is not stillness, but a harmonious tension. Peace is not a state of laziness or lack of pressure. Sometimes it is like the tension of a guitar string, held in balance between 2 points, ready to create beautiful music. It is a dynamic equilibrium, a skillful navigation between opposing demands. The Pharisees and Herodians came to trap Jesus with a question about paying taxes to Caesar. If he said yes, he would be hated by the people. If he said no, he would be arrested by the Roman authorities. He did not choose a side. Instead, he asked to see a coin and asked, "Whose image is this, and whose inscription?" They replied, "Caesar's." He then gave a classic answer. "Render therefore to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." He did not eliminate the tension. He defined it wisely. He created a peace based on recognizing and respecting different duties, a dynamic balance that each person must find for themselves. 36. Philosophy of righteous anger. Even anger that comes from a just cause can become poison. When we see injustice, it is easy to become angry and believe our anger is righteous. But a peacemaker knows that the line between indignation for justice and destructive hatred is very thin. The challenge is to maintain the fire of passion for truth without letting anger take control. In the Garden of Gethsemane, when the crowd came to arrest Jesus, Peter drew his sword and cut off the ear of the high priest's servant. Peter's anger stemmed from loyalty and a desire to protect his teacher. But Jesus immediately stopped him. "Put your sword back in its place, for all who draw the sword will die by the sword." Then he touched the servant's ear and healed him. This action shows that the path of peace does not accept violence, even when done with good intentions. He showed a higher way, healing instead of harming. 37. Philosophy of sanctuary. Creating spaces of peace for others. A peacemaker not only resolves conflicts but also actively creates oases of peace. This could be a physical space, an atmosphere in the home, or simply a pause in a conversation where others feel safe to unburden themselves and be themselves. The Bible repeatedly records Jesus withdrawing to a quiet place to pray, going up on a mountainside by himself, or getting into a boat to get away from the crowd. He was not only seeking peace for himself. When he took his disciples to those places, he was creating a sacred space, a sanctuary from the noise of the world. In those quiet spaces, the deepest teachings were given, and weary hearts were restored. 38. Philosophy of shared responsibility. Peace is a symphony that requires many musicians. Peace in a community is not the work of a single individual. It is a shared responsibility, a common burden, and also a common joy. Everyone has a role, big or small, in maintaining harmony. When faced with a crowd of 5,000 hungry men, the disciples wanted to send them away. But Jesus said, "You give them something to eat." They only had 4 loaves and 2 fish. Jesus did not do it all by himself. He took what they had, gave thanks, broke it, and gave it to the disciples to distribute to the people. This miracle was a community effort. A boy gave his small meal, Jesus sanctified it, and the disciples became the distributors. Peace and abundance are created when everyone shares the responsibility. 39. Philosophy of strength in weakness. Peace is discovered the moment we accept our own imperfection. We often try to hide our weaknesses, thinking that strength and peace come from perfection. But sacred philosophy teaches the opposite. True strength and deep peace are often found precisely in the moment we accept our limitations and helplessness and open our hearts to grace. A disciple might have come to Jesus lamenting a bad habit he could not break. a weakness that robbed him of peace. Jesus might have looked at him with compassion and said, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Peace comes not from completely eliminating weakness, but from realizing that even in that weakness, the power and love of God have an opportunity to work. Accepting our own imperfection is the first step to experiencing the peace of God. 40. Philosophy of disruption. The peace of God can disrupt the false peace of the world. The world often has a kind of peace built on oppression, the silence of the weak, or the denial of truth. When the true peace of God arrives, it can cause disruption, challenge the status quo, and overturn an unjust social order. It is like light shining into a dark room, revealing dust and cobwebs. Jesus said, "I did not come to bring peace, but a sword." This statement sounds contradictory, but he was talking about how his truth would cause a division between darkness and light, between injustice and justice. His arrival challenged the powerful and lifted up the humble. This disruption is necessary to break down false peace and clear the way for a true, more lasting peace built on truth. Before we continue with today's journey of discovery, we would greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to leave a comment and share your feelings. If you found this content valuable, please don't forget to hit the share button to spread these positive vibes to your friends and family. And now, let's get back to the program. 41. Philosophy of gratitude. A grateful heart cannot long contain bitterness. Bitterness and resentment are enemies of inner peace. One of the most effective remedies is the practice of gratitude. When we actively seek and acknowledge the good things in our lives, no matter how small, our minds will have no room for negative emotions. In the story of the 10 lepers who were healed, only one returned to give thanks. Jesus said to him, "Rise and go. Your faith has made you well." The word for made well here, in Greek sozo, also means saved or made whole. The other 9 were healed physically, but only the one with a grateful heart truly received peace and wholeness in his soul. Gratitude completed his healing miracle. 42. Philosophy of childlikeness. Children are teachers of peace. Adults often complicate peace with conditions, long-held memories, and oversized egos. Children show us a simpler way. They forgive easily, live fully in the present moment, and do not hold grudges. When the disciples argued about who was the greatest, Jesus called a child and had him stand among them. He might have pointed to other children playing nearby. They might have just argued, snatched a toy. But a moment later, they were laughing and playing together again as if nothing had happened. Then he said, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." To become like little children is to have the ability to recover quickly, to forgive without calculation, and to trust with simplicity. These are the core qualities of a peacemaker. 43. Philosophy of the first step. The 1,000-mile journey of reconciliation begins with one courageous step. In a conflict, both sides often wait for the other to act first. The silence and distance grow. The entire healing process can depend on the courage of one person who dares to break the silence, who dares to take the risky first step toward the other. In the parable of the prodigal son, the decisive moment of reconciliation was not when the father ran to embrace his son, but the moment before, when the son came to his senses among the pigs. he decided to get up and begin the journey back with a prepared speech of repentance. That first step out of the mire of despair and shame was the greatest act of peacemaking. It required tremendous humility and courage. 44. Philosophy of honest lament. Peace does not require us to suppress our sorrow. True peace is not a fake happy mask. It allows for grief, disappointment, and even honest complaints to be voiced. Expressing one's suffering honestly before God and others is part of the healing process. On the cross, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, quoting a line from the Psalms, my God, why have you forsaken me?" This was not a word of weakness, but the height of honesty in prayer. It was a lament, an act of expressing pain without concealment. By doing so, he sanctified all the cries of suffering of humanity and showed that the path to resurrection peace can pass through the valley of honest lament. 45. Philosophy of active stillness. Peace is not passivity, but an intense inner struggle. Do not mistake peace for doing nothing. Peace can be the result of a fierce internal battle against temptation, of hours of persistent prayer, of holding a non-violent stance under pressure, or of quietly preserving unity in a community on the brink of collapse. Before beginning his public ministry, Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness and remained there for 40 days and nights, fasting and praying. It was not a vacation. It was a period of direct confrontation with the most subtle temptations of power, fame, and ease. By winning this internal struggle, he established a peace and a solid conviction in his soul that served as the foundation for his entire subsequent ministry. 46. Philosophy of false peace. Beware the silence of the tomb. Not all silence is peace. There is the silence of fear, where the weak dare not speak up. There is the silence of oppression, where justice is trampled. There is the silence of denial, where people pretend everything is fine. This is the peace of a tomb, which appears quiet on the outside, but is full of death on the inside. Jesus strongly criticized the scribes and Pharisees who maintained an outward appearance of piety and peace. "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of the bones of the dead and everything unclean." He was attacking their false peace. He showed that a peace based only on external forms, lacking justice and charity within, is detestable in the sight of God. 47. Philosophy of collaboration. Working together can build more effective bridges than words. Words can be misunderstood, and arguments can lead to division. But when people who are different or even hostile toward each other roll up their sleeves for a common, constructive task, the walls of prejudice can naturally crumble. Shared sweat and effort are a powerful language of reconciliation. When Jesus called his first disciples, he did not organize a theological conference. He went to fishermen like Peter and Andrew, and even a despised tax collector like Matthew. These men belonged to different social classes and likely had many prejudices against each other. But he gave them a common task: "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." It was in that common mission, in working together, in facing difficulties together, that they learned to accept and love one another, forming a unified community. 48. Philosophy of small victories. Celebrate every step forward on the journey of reconciliation. Peacemaking is a long and sometimes discouraging road. If we only look at the final destination, we can feel exhausted. Therefore, it is important to recognize and celebrate every small victory, every breakthrough, every moment of reconciliation, no matter how small. When the 72 disciples whom Jesus had sent out to preach returned, they were full of joy and said, "Lord, even the demons submit to us in your name." Jesus did not downplay their joy. He shared in it and elevated it to a new level. He said, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven." He celebrated this small victory with them, seeing it as a sign of the final victory of the kingdom of God. This celebration gave them strength and hope to continue their journey. 49. Philosophy of empathy. The greatest gift you can give another is the feeling of being understood. One of the deepest human needs is to be truly seen and understood for who we are, without judgment. When we give someone this gift, we are creating a safe space for healing and peace. At the well in Samaria, Jesus struck up a conversation with a woman whose life was complex and full of wounds. He spoke of her past directly, but without any hint of condemnation. The woman was so astonished that she ran back to her village and told everyone, "Come, see a man who told me everything I ever did." What transformed her was not a miracle, but the feeling, for the first time in her life, of being seen to the core of her being, yet still treated with respect. That feeling of being understood was the beginning of peace in her soul and reconciliation with her community. 50. Philosophy of homecoming. Peace is the journey back to the true home of the soul. Ultimately, all efforts to build peace externally are a reflection of a deep inner longing, the longing to return home. Home here is not a physical place, but a state of being, a complete union with our origin, with the love of God. At the Last Supper, when the disciples were anxious about his departure, Jesus gave them a promise containing ultimate peace. "Do not let your hearts be troubled. My Father's house has many rooms. I am going there to prepare a place for you. I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am." This is the promise of an eternal homecoming. The entire journey of peacemaking on this earth, with all its difficulties and challenges, ultimately points toward one destination, a place of belonging, of absolute safety, and of perfect communion in the Father's house. That is the perfect peace that every soul longs for. 51. Philosophy of boundaries. True peace requires healthy boundaries. Kindness does not mean allowing oneself to be exploited or exhausted. A wise peacemaker knows when to say no, when to retreat to protect their energy and mental health so they can continue to give sustainably. The Bible recounts many times that after teaching and healing the crowds, Jesus would actively withdraw to a deserted place or go to the other side of the lake. There were times when the people sought him eagerly, but he still decided to have private time. Once, after hearing that John the Baptist had been killed, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. This action shows that even the Son of God needed space to face grief and recover. Setting boundaries, allowing oneself space and time to recharge, is not selfishness, but a necessary condition for maintaining inner peace and continuing one's mission. 52. Philosophy of the question. A wise question is more powerful than 1,000 answers. When faced with hostility or a complex situation, giving a direct answer can increase opposition. But a well-timed, well-placed question can bypass the defenses of the intellect, inviting others to self-reflect and discover the answer from within themselves. When the chief priests and elders questioned Jesus in the temple about by what authority he did these things, he did not answer directly. Instead, he asked them a question. "I will also ask you one question. If you answer me, I will tell you by what authority I am doing these things. John's baptism. Where did it come from? Was it from heaven or from human origin? This question put them in a dilemma, forcing them to confront their own dishonesty. He used a question to silence his opponents, teaching that sometimes the best way to create peace is to provoke self-examination in others. 53. Philosophy of silent service. Simple acts of service can mend great fractures. In times of tension or after a breakdown in a relationship, words of apology or explanation can become meaningless. But a humble act of service, a non-verbal gesture of care, can convey the message of love and reconciliation most powerfully. After his resurrection, Jesus appeared to his disciples by the Sea of Tiberias. Peter, who had denied his teacher 3 times, must have been carrying a heavy burden of guilt. Jesus did not begin with a sermon or a reprimand. He did something very simple. He made a charcoal fire, cooked fish and bread, and then called to them, "Come and have breakfast." That simple breakfast on the shore was an act of loving service. It was in that warm and caring context that he then asked Peter 3 times, "Do you love me?" to heal his 3 denials. Peace was restored first through a meal and then through words. 54. Philosophy of self-forgiveness. We cannot be channels of peace for others if we are at war with ourselves. Carrying the burden of past mistakes is like wearing a stone on your back. A peacemaker must first learn to accept God's forgiveness for themselves. Only when the soul is freed from guilt can we truly bring freedom and peace to others. The conversation between Jesus and Peter by the sea is a wonderful lesson in self-forgiveness. When Jesus asked, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He was not dredging up the pain to torment him. He was giving Peter a chance to replace the memory of 3 denials with 3 affirmations of love. Each answer, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you," was a step on the path to healing. Jesus did not say, "I forgive you." He guided Peter so that he could step out of the prison of his own regret and embrace his mission again. 55. Philosophy of the bridge. Position. A peacemaker often stands in the middle, an uncomfortable place. To connect 2 chasms, a bridge must bear tension from both sides and does not fully belong to either side. Similarly, a peacemaker often has to stand between 2 opposing factions, accepting misunderstanding and criticism from both sides in order to become a point of connection. Jesus is the ultimate bridge between God and humanity. But in his ministry, he was also a bridge between Jews and Gentiles, between the righteous and sinners, between the rich and the poor. When he praised the faith of the Roman centurion, he was seen as a compromiser by zealous Jews. When he ate with tax collectors, he was considered unclean by the Pharisees. This in-between position is full of loneliness and danger, but it is the only position from which reconciliation can occur. 56. Philosophy of healing memories. Peace requires confronting the wounds of the past. Current conflicts often have their roots in historical wounds, in generational feuds passed down from one generation to the next. A lasting peace cannot be built by ignoring the past. It requires the courage to look back, acknowledge the pain, and actively heal wounded memories. The enmity between Jews and Samaritans was a deep historical wound. Orthodox Jews despised and avoided Samaritans. But Jesus actively broke that rule. He not only passed through Samaria, but he also sat down by a well and struck up a conversation with a Samaritan woman. Furthermore, In the parable of the Good Samaritan, he made a Samaritan the hero of the story. With these actions, he was not just healing an individual. He was performing a symbolic act of reconciliation, healing the wounded memory of an entire people. 57. Philosophy of the second mile. Using unexpected generosity to break the cycle of hatred. The natural instinct is to resist oppression, but Jesus taught a revolutionary peace strategy. Respond to oppression with an unexpected generosity. This action disarms the oppressor, turns the victim into the one in control, and can completely break the vicious cycle of violence. In the Sermon on the Mount, he said, "If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Under Roman law, a soldier had the right to compel a civilian to carry his gear for 1 mile. It was an act of oppression. A Jew might have asked, "Why should we do more than what we are forced to do?" Jesus might have explained, "The first mile you walk in anger and humiliation, but the second mile is your choice. In that second mile, you are no longer a victim. You are a free person. You reclaim your dignity and confuse the soldier. You have turned an act of power into an opportunity for love." 58. Philosophy of reception. Peace is also a gift, not just an achievement. We strive, we try to build peace, and that is necessary. But at some point, we must realize that we cannot create peace by our own strength. True peace is also a grace, a fruit of the Holy Spirit, a gift that we must open our hearts to humbly receive. At the Last Supper, Jesus said these words to his disciples, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives." The world's peace depends on external circumstances. No war, enough to eat and wear. But the peace of the Lord is an internal gift, independent of external conditions. A disciple trying to do everything to find peace might be reminded by the Lord, "Stop striving. Be still and let my peace permeate your soul. Receive it as a gift." 59. Philosophy of a clear conscience. A clear conscience is an impenetrable fortress. External chaos cannot overthrow a person who has the peace that comes from a clear conscience. When we live in truth and act with integrity, we build an inner fortress that no slander or injustice from the outside can completely destroy. John the Baptist was imprisoned by King Herod for courageously speaking the truth about the king's illicit marriage. In prison, facing death, he still maintained his dignity and peace. He did not compromise, did not beg. His peace came not from physical freedom, but from the serenity of a conscience with nothing to be ashamed of. He is proof that the highest peace comes from living and dying for the truth. 60. Philosophy of the already but not yet, living in the tension between hope and reality. The peace of the kingdom of God has come to earth through Jesus, but it has not yet been fully realized. A peacemaker lives in this tension. On one hand, rejoicing that peace is already a tangible reality. On the other hand, persevering in laboring for its fullness in the future. This helps us to be hopeful without becoming passive. The parable of the wheat and the weeds illustrates this clearly. The master sows good seed, wheat, the children of the kingdom. But the enemy sows weeds, evil, conflict. The servants want to pull up the weeds immediately. But the master says, "No, because while you are pulling the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest." We are called to care for the wheat of peace, to make it grow strong right in the midst of the conflicts and evils, the weeds of the world, with a firm hope in God's final harvest. Before we continue with today's journey of discovery, we would greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to leave a comment and share your feelings. If you found this content valuable, please don't forget to hit the share button to spread these positive vibes to your friends and family. And now, let's get back to the program. 61. Philosophy of the healing story. A story can touch the heart when reason has failed. When people have closed their hearts with logic and prejudice, a story or a parable can be like a small seed, slipping through the cracks and sprouting from within. Storytelling is an art of reconciliation, helping listeners to see themselves in the narrative and change their perspective voluntarily. A teacher of the law came to ask Jesus a discriminatory question: "Who is my neighbor?" Instead of giving a dry definition, Jesus told the story of the Good Samaritan. He let the story do its own work. In the end, he simply asked the teacher of the law back, "Which of these three do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers?" The story broke the listener's prejudice and forced him to admit that a neighbor is not limited by race or religion. 62. Philosophy of communal silence. A shared silence can connect souls. In a noisy world, people often try to fill every gap with words. But sometimes, the deepest communion, the most complete peace between two people, is found in a comfortable silence, when both share a space, a moment, without needing words. The image of Mary sitting at Jesus' feet is often imagined as her listening intently to his words. But perhaps a large part of that listening was simply being in the peace that radiated from him. It was a silent communion. There are pains that no words can soothe, joys that no words can fully express. In those moments, the silent presence of a friend, a teacher, is the most profound act of peacemaking. 63. Philosophy of freedom from reputation. Being willing to be misunderstood for a higher purpose. A peacemaker cannot let their actions be dictated by the fear of what others might think. They must be willing to be criticized, to have their motives questioned, even to have their reputation damaged, if it is necessary for healing and reconciliation. Jesus did this frequently. He touched a leper, an act considered unclean, spoke with women in public against custom, and especially ate with tax collectors and sinners. For these actions, the religious leaders called him a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. He was willing to sacrifice his reputation in the eyes of the righteous to bring peace and salvation to those rejected by society. 64. Philosophy of the authority of gentleness. The power to persuade comes from a kind soul. True authority in peacemaking does not come from metals. Power or physical strength. It comes from the irresistible influence of a gentle, loving, and steadfast soul. That gentleness is not weakness, but strength under control. When the boat was in the storm, Jesus did not scream at the storm. He simply gave a command: "Quiet, be still." And the sea obeyed. That is an image of the authority of peace. Similarly, when facing souls turbulent with anger, fear, or hatred, a calm and gentle presence has a strange authority to quiet the waves, an authority that shouting or imposition can never have. 65. Philosophy of rituals of reconciliation. Rituals create a sacred space for healing. Humans need symbolic actions, rituals, to mark important transitions in life. In reconciliation, a ritual can create a safe and sacred space where an apology is spoken and forgiveness is received in a formal and meaningful way. Jesus' institution of the Eucharist is a supreme example. Take and eat. This is my body. Drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. He created a ritual for the Christian community to continually return to remember, to be forgiven, and to re-establish communion, peace, with God and with each other. This ritual becomes the heart of reconciliation in the community. 66. Philosophy of interconnection. My peace depends on your peace. We are not separate islands. We are connected in an invisible network of humanity. My peace cannot be complete if the person next to me is suffering. Recognizing this interconnection is the foundation for compassion and all peacemaking efforts. In his priestly prayer at the Last Supper, John 17, Jesus did not pray for his disciples to become separate, holy individuals. He prayed that all of them may be one, Father, just as you are in me and I am in you. May they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. The unity, the peace within the community, is the most powerful witness to the world outside. Peace is not a personal achievement, but a communal reality. 67. Philosophy of eternal perspective. Many conflicts become small when viewed from an eternal perspective. The arguments, the worries that we consider urgent and vital today may become insignificant when placed in the flow of time and the context of eternity. Having this perspective helps us to remain calm and not get caught up in unnecessary conflicts. A disciple might have run to Jesus, frantic about some logistical issue or an insult. Jesus, instead of getting caught up in the panic, might have pointed to the birds in the sky and said, "Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap, yet your heavenly Father feeds them." He was inviting the disciple to step out of the narrow time frame of immediate anxiety and into the vast time frame of God's providence. From that perspective, many problems lose their power to disturb our peace. 68. Philosophy of contagion. Peace is as contagious as fear. In a crowd, fear and anger can spread like wildfire. But fortunately, a calm and peaceful presence has a similar power to spread. A peacemaker not only extinguishes fires, but is also a source that radiates coolness. Be the source of contagion you want to see in the world. After Jesus healed the demon-possessed man in the region of the Gerasenes, the man was described as sitting there, dressed and in his right mind. His peace sent a shock wave through the whole region. At first it was fear of a strange power, but later he himself became the one to proclaim what the Lord had done for him. A soul at peace can become a catalyst for the transformation of an entire community. 69. Philosophy of focus. A divided mind cannot have peace. Peace comes from consistency and integrity within. When we try to live for multiple conflicting purposes, wanting to serve God while also chasing money, wanting to be true to ourselves while also pleasing everyone, we will always be in a state of anxiety and stress. Jesus taught very clearly, "No one can serve two masters. You cannot serve both God and money." This teaching is not just about money. It is about anything we make a master in our lives besides God. He explained that trying to serve two masters is the source of all anxiety about what to eat or wear. A single-minded devotion to the kingdom of God brings coherence to life, and from that, peace will arise. 70. Philosophy of destination. Ultimate peace is a relationship. The final goal of all peace efforts is not an abstract state of serenity, but a restored, loving relationship. It is reconciliation with God, and consequently, reconciliation with oneself and with others. The entire story of salvation does not end with a proven truth, but with a re-established relationship. The first act of the risen Christ was not a victory parade, but actively seeking out his grieving and scattered friends. The first words he spoke to them when he appeared in the locked room were, "Peace be with you." This greeting was not a hollow wish. It was a declaration and a gift. He himself was their peace, and that peace was his loving and forgiving presence, restoring the relationship that had been broken. 71. Philosophy of embodiment. Peace is expressed through the body. A peaceful soul will naturally manifest on the outside. It is not just an abstract idea, but a visible state through one's posture, eyes, voice, and gestures. A truly peaceful person carries a tranquil atmosphere that can calm the tension of those around them. When the angry crowd brought the woman caught in adultery before Jesus, the atmosphere must have been murderous and tense. But Jesus did not confront them. He simply bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. This slow, calm, and somewhat mysterious action immediately broke the aggression of the crowd. His silence and posture created a pause, forcing everyone to stop and wait. Before he spoke a word, the peace radiating from his body had already begun the process of disarming the crowd. He taught that sometimes how we are present is more important than what we say. 72. Philosophy of distinction. Peacekeeping is different from peacemaking. Peacekeeping often means maintaining a status quo, even if that status quo is built on injustice. It is about avoiding conflict at all costs. Peacemaking is more courageous. It dares to confront conflict, to uproot the sources of injustice in order to build a new, genuine, and lasting harmony. Jesus' act of overturning the tables of the merchants in the temple was not a peacekeeping act. If he wanted to keep the peace, he could have ignored it or spoken gently, but he chose peacemaking. He broke the false peace of a religious system that had become commercialized and corrupted. He was restoring true peace to his Father's house, a peace based on sacredness and justice. Sometimes, to have real peace, one must dare to break a false tranquility. 73. Philosophy of not knowing. Peace comes from letting go of the need to control and have all the answers. The human mind craves certainty and the ability to control the future. This very craving is a source of anxiety. Deep peace is found in accepting mystery, trusting in a greater wisdom, and having the courage to live with unanswered questions. After his resurrection, the disciples asked Jesus, "Lord, are you at this time going to restore the kingdom to Israel?" They wanted a plan, a specific timeline. But Jesus replied, "It is not for you to know the times or dates the Father has set by his own authority." He did not give them an answer that satisfied their curiosity, but invited them to live in trust. He taught them to find peace not in knowing the future, but in being faithful to their mission in the present. "You will be my witnesses," and in trusting the results to God. 74. Philosophy of skill. Peacemaking is a skill that needs to be practiced. Besides being a virtue or a gift, peacemaking is also a practical skill. Like a carpenter or a musician, we only become more proficient through practice, through failures, learning from experience, and persistent honing. Once the disciples failed to cast a demon out of a child. After Jesus had healed the boy, they asked him privately, "Why couldn't we drive it out?" Jesus replied, "This kind can come out only by prayer and fasting." This answer shows that the power and peace to confront evil are not automatically available. It is a spiritual skill that requires training, discipline, fasting, and a constant connection with God, prayer. We become better peacemakers with each practice and effort. 75. Philosophy of planting trees, sowing seeds of peace for a future generation. True peacemakers often do work whose fruits they will never see. They are like tree planters, happily cultivating a mighty oak, knowing that its shade will be for generations yet unborn. They act not for immediate gain, but for a long-term vision of a better world. Jesus spent most of his time and energy training a group of 12 imperfect men. They were doubtful, slow to understand, competitive, and fearful. From a short-term efficiency perspective, this might seem suboptimal. But he was not just solving the problems of his own time. He was planting trees. He was sowing the seeds of the word and of community into the soil of the apostles' souls, knowing that those seeds would grow into a church, a community of peace, that would continue his mission long after he had ascended to heaven. 76. Philosophy of possessions. How we use our wealth reflects the peace in our souls. Attachment to material possessions is one of the greatest sources of anxiety, fear, and division. A peacemaker understands that possessions are a tool, not an end. Sharing wealth creates community and joy. Hoarding it creates isolation and insecurity. When the rich young man came to ask Jesus how to gain eternal life, Jesus told him to keep the commandments. The man replied that he had kept them since he was a boy. Jesus looked at him with love and said, "One thing you lack. Go, sell everything you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me." At this, the man's face fell. He went away sad, because he had great wealth. His attachment to possessions had become the wall preventing him from attaining the peace and true freedom of following Jesus. 77. Philosophy of folly. The path of peace is often considered foolish by the world. From the perspective of worldly wisdom, which values power, revenge, and self-interest, the path of the peacemaker often seems naive, weak, and utterly foolish. Forgiving enemies, going the extra mile, blessing those who curse you, these things are illogical. On the cross, the folly of peace is displayed in its ultimate form. The passers-by, the chief priests, and the elders all mocked him. He saved others, but he can't save himself. He trusts in God. Let God rescue him now if he wants him. His refusal to use power to save himself, and instead praying, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing," was the greatest foolish act by the world's standards. Yet it was the ultimate wisdom of God to bring peace to humanity. 78. Philosophy of prophetic voice, courageously speaking truth to power, gently. Peacemaking is not always about soothing. Sometimes it requires extraordinary courage to confront those in power and speak the truth about the injustice they are causing. However, the power of this speech lies not in aggression, but in a steadfast commitment to truth and a non-violent attitude. John the Baptist is a model of this. He did not organize an armed rebellion against King Herod. Instead, he used his only weapon, the truth. He publicly told the king, "It is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife." It was an act of peacemaking because it sought to restore moral order. Though it costed him his life, his gentle but firm words still echo, showing that truth has a power greater than the swords of tyrants. 79. Philosophy of ordinariness, finding holiness in mundane things. Many people seek peace and holiness in distant places, in extraordinary actions. But Jesus' philosophy shows that peace often hides in the simple, everyday tasks when they are done with great love and attention. Before beginning his public ministry, Jesus lived 30 years of a hidden life in Nazareth. He lived as a carpenter, doing daily manual labor. Those 30 years were not wasted time. It was the time he sanctified ordinary work. This hidden life teaches us that peace is not only found on a high mountain in prayer or in the midst of a crowd performing miracles. It is also found in the sound of a saw, the strike of a chisel, in completing a small task faithfully and lovingly. 80. Philosophy of time. A peaceful person lives in harmony with the flow of time. An anxious mind is a mind that is always rushing, always feeling late, always haunted by the past or driven by the future. A person who lives in peace has the ability to dwell in the present moment. They are not controlled by time, but live in harmony with it, trusting in God's perfect timing. At the wedding in Cana, when his mother Mary told Jesus they had run out of wine, he replied, "Woman, what does that have to do with you and me? My hour has not yet come." This response shows that he did not act under the pressure of circumstances or human panic. He operated on a divine timetable. However, immediately after, he still performed the miracle. This shows a wonderful balance. On one hand, he trusted in the Father's hour. On the other, he remained flexible and responded to the immediate need with compassion. 81. Philosophy of the Soul's Sabbath. Finding true rest for the soul. Besides the weekly Sabbath day, there is an inner Sabbath. It is a state of the soul where we can let our spirit rest from all striving, struggle, anxiety, and judgment. It is the state of simply being in the presence of God and letting Him act. Jesus' famous invitation is an invitation to the soul's Sabbath. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." This rest is not laziness. It is entrusting one's burdens to the Lord, giving up trying to control everything oneself. It is the peace that comes from knowing one is loved and cared for, a peace that can be experienced even in the middle of a busy workday. 82. Philosophy of success. Redefining success as finding peace. The world defines success by power, wealth, victory, and recognition. The kingdom of God, however, defines success by faithfulness, service, mercy, and reconciliation. True peace is found only when we abandon the world's yardstick and adopt the yardstick of the kingdom. In the parable of the talents, the servants who were given 5 and 2 talents made a profit. The master's praise was not, "Well done, good and successful servant," but, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Peace comes not from the scale of the result, but from faithfulness to the given mission, however small. Success in God's eyes is the degree of love and faithfulness we put into our work. 83. Philosophy of shared pain. A peaceful community is a place where people dare to weep together. A truly peaceful community is not a place that is always happy, without tears. On the contrary, it is a place safe enough for people to express their pain honestly, and where others are willing to sit down and weep with them. A shared sorrow is a sorrow halved, and it creates a deep bond. When Lazarus died, Jesus went to Bethany. Seeing Mary and the Jews with her weeping, the Bible records that he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled, and then Jesus wept. The one who had the power to raise the dead did not stand on high to bestow a miracle. He humbled himself, entered into human suffering, and shared their tears. He taught that before healing, a peacemaker must learn to suffer with others. 84. Philosophy of the liberation of truth. The truth can be painful, but it is the only path to freedom. Peace built on lies or self-deception is just a fragile illusion. The truth can sometimes be harsh and difficult to accept, but it has the power to free us from the chains of illusion, fear, and guilt. Only when we stand firm in the truth can we have true peace. Jesus said to the Jews who had believed in him, "If you hold to my teaching, you are really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." A disciple might be living in self-satisfaction or hiding a certain sin. The word of the Lord, like a sword, might pierce the heart, causing pain. But the wound inflicted by truth is a wound that heals, freeing him from his inner prison so he can live in the peace of a free person. 85. Philosophy of the final enemy. Peace comes from conquering the fear of death. The greatest enemy of peace, the most primal and profound fear in the human heart, is the fear of death and nothingness. All efforts to build peace in this world would be meaningless if, in the end, everything is swallowed by death. Ultimate peace comes from the conviction that love is stronger than death. The resurrection of Jesus is the definitive answer to this fear. When he appeared to his disciples in the locked room, his presence brought not only joy, but also dispelled their greatest fear. His resurrected body, still bearing the nail marks, is the ultimate proof that life and love cannot be contained in a tomb. By conquering death, he has secured a peace that even the final enemy cannot take away. This is the firmest foundation for all our hopes and all our actions of peacemaking. Thus, our contemplative journey through the 85 philosophies of the teaching "Blessed are the peacemakers" has come to an end. We have walked a long road together, unfolding each facet of the precious gem that Jesus has given us. From the philosophies of inner peace, the power of forgiveness, the courage of humility, to the peace found in the simplest things. It is hoped that, through these reflections, somewhere in each of our souls, a seed of peace has been sown. The Lord's teaching is not a dry formula to be memorized, but a living invitation to engage. The journey of peacemaking is not something grand at the very end of the road. It begins right here, in this very moment. Perhaps it is the decision to hold back an angry word and replace it with a moment of silence. Perhaps it is the courage to perform an act of forgiveness that you have long postponed. Or perhaps it is simply truly listening to a loved one without judgment. Each of these small actions, even if unseen, is a precious brick we are using to build the temple of peace in our souls and for the world, to be worthy of the noblest title, Child of God. Thank you for accompanying Church Audio on this journey. Your listening and contemplation are a great source of motivation for us. Which philosophy touched your heart the most? Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. Let us together create a community that spreads peace. If you found value in this video, please give us a like and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to press the notification bell so you don't miss our next meaningful spiritual journeys. And if you feel someone out there needs to hear this message, please share this video with them. Once again, thank you sincerely. Wishing you all always find true peace. May the peace of Christ, a peace the world cannot give, be with you always. With love. And see you again at Church Audio, 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 at Church Audio.